What is going on, YouTube? Northeast Ohio here, back for part 4 of our NBA offseason targets. We had previously talked about a lot of the teams that didn't make the playoffs slash NBA bubble. And today we're going to touch on not all the playoff teams, but we're going to pull some players from teams that were recently eliminated. If you missed any of the previous parts, I recommend go checking them out. There's, like I said, 3 parts so far. Each one covers about 5 players. We're going to do the same thing today. Uh, if you're not familiar with this series, essentially what we're doing here is I'm looking for guys to either primarily to buy now and send in the PSA for grading. Since we are in the NBA offseason, this is a good time to get that stuff done. It has recently come out that it looks like the season is not going to come back until at least January and probably mid to late January at best. So it's the tail end of September. We have October, November, December, and January. That's 4 months to send our cards off to PSA or whoever you choose, but I would recommend PSA for the purposes of NBA stuff and get those cards back in time to list for the beginning of next season or hold into next season. Now, if you don't want to grade, I get it. Or if you buy some of this stuff and not everything's going to be in perfect shape to send off to sell or to grade and get tens, you could also just as well hold these cards. I think these are good buys holding them raw. So first up to bat, and we have 2 players from this team. I usually, and just as a caveat before we get started, I try to go with a little bit more not off the wall, but like not like the guys. That being said, there's probably 1 or 2 in here. And then this is going to be the last part of this video series. I think the next thing I'm going to do is concentrate on some individual players, like do like a Luka deep dive and look at all his rookie stuff, like all his popular rookie stuff, and see like, is there anything undervalued, and kind of do the same thing with Trae Young and some of the other more high profile trendy players, Ja, Zion, etc. And those will each be individual videos. So I think that's going to be my next project now that I finish this one up. So let's get into the players. First up, Oklahoma City Thunder. And it is Darius Baisley. He got some run in the bubble and in the playoffs and played pretty well. And I think there's a good chance OKC has let Billy Donovan go. He's off to the Bulls now. There's already rumors about Chris Paul getting traded. So I think there is a decent chance that the Thunder go full rebuild. And if they go full rebuild, Darius Baisley is going to get a ton of playing time. And he put up huge numbers in limited playing time during the NBA bubble games. You can see here, and typically, once again, if you guys didn't see the earlier parts, I'm strictly talking about base prisms unless otherwise noted. I'm just keeping this simple. Prism is king when it comes to NBA, and that's what you should be focusing on. If you want to get tricky and get in the select and optic, that's fine too. The players that we're talking about would apply to any of the brands that you want, but I am specifically going to be speaking about just base prism to keep this easy. So up here we have 130 point. I'm going to fluctuate between 130 point and market movers. Some of this lower end stuff is not in market movers, but here you could see Baisley's base prisms. These really go all over the place. You see one there at the top here went for $6. Here's one that went for 12. Here's 6 that went for 60. 3 that went for 18. So you get a general idea of what these prices are like. They kind of jump around a little bit, but it looks like between about $8 and $10 seems to be the sweet spot. And then in a PSA 10, they're going for a little over $100, 130, 135. That's a green or a parallel rather, 130. So they're basically between 130, 135 and a PSA 10. So that's not a bad return if you could pull the 10. Around $10 for the raw, $20 to get graded through an economy order. So you're looking at about $30 total into the card for a potentially $130 card. And once again, that's at today's prices, not 90 to 120 days from now, where I expect this stuff to rise as we build into the hype mode for next season. And I think Baisley is a prime candidate for that. If they start blowing it up this NBA offseason, they're not getting rid of Baisley. And he could be getting 30 to 36 minutes a night, putting up a ton of points. And that leads me perfectly into the next guy. And this one's fairly obvious, but he was super trendy, didn't play well, backslid a little bit, uh, and has kind of leveled off a little bit now. And that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I love SGA. This is his base prism that we're talking about. I don't have a chart for this. I'm surprised this actually isn't in Market Movers, so I did a chart any card. But you could see his base prisms are going for about 25 to 30 bucks. So this is a little bit more expensive one on the list. And you can also see, here's his PSA 10 prices, sitting between a little over 200 to 230 for a PSA 10. And his raws going for about 30. So 30 bucks for the raw, 20 bucks to grade it, for potentially taking it up to 200 bucks. Now, once again, Chris Paul gets traded, they blow it up. SGA is one of their main building blocks. He's going to get a ton of run and put up a ton of numbers when he doesn't have to share the ball with Chris Paul anymore. And even potentially Dennis Schroeder. If they decide to go full rebuild mode, they're not going to keep Schroeder around. He'll be a popular guy for sixth man of the year, or like a sixth guy off the bench, like Lou Williams style for playoff teams. So I can see them offloading Schroeder as well, along with Steven Adams. Like they could go completely young and just blow everything up. But I really like SGA as both a buy now and grade, and also a long-term hold. Same with Darius Baisley. These are two guys that if you didn't sell them in the lead up to next season, or maybe, the common thing that I like to talk about is getting multiples of stuff and selling off a portion, would be I wouldn't mind holding either one of these guys into the season. Now, if they go full rebuild, they're not going to be a playoff contender, but I could definitely see both guys putting up monster numbers for this team if they go rebuild, and I think they're going to. That's you let Donovan go, and CP3 is probably going bye. I think they're going to go full rebuild mode and give these young guys a ton of run. But for 30 bucks for a raw prism, that seems pretty cheap for someone of SGA standards, and I could definitely see that going up for sure. You can see his PSA 10 prices kind of bounced around a little bit, but the high on his PSA 10 was over 400 bucks, and it was in the 300s for a long time. So I could easily see this getting back up to 300 at least, even if it doesn't get all the way back up to the market peak that we had in mid to late August there. Next up, and this is another like duh one, but once again, we're on talking more about the playoff teams, so that the picks become a little more obvious. And that's MPJ. I really like MPJ. I think he showed flashes of what he could be, and now the cat is out of the bag on that one. They were giving him limited run. They didn't play him all season. Everyone was pissed. They gave him some bubble run. He put up huge games. He got some playoff run, a little hit or miss in the playoffs, but that's to be expected. First time in the playoffs. Didn't get a lot of run in the regular season. Was trying to find his place. Now going in the next season, the Nuggets are going to be perennial Western Conference favorites. Now they have showed that they are legit. Jokic and Murray are the stars of that team, but I could definitely see Porter potentially forming a quote unquote big three for them. The other thing that could happen is if they decide to go a little bit of a different route, they could flip Porter if they don't believe in Porter, which I don't know why you wouldn't. He looked great. His defense sucks, but on offense, he looks great. But maybe they take Porter and try to spin him into a more proven player, like a Bradley Beal or someone like that. Anyone that they go to, whether it's Bradley Beal or not, but someone of that status, the other team's going to want Porter in any trade that they offer. Then if that happens, now he's the guy on whatever team he goes to and is going to put up huge numbers. But I think he is going to stay with Denver. There's a good chance maybe they don't bring Millsap back. They have a lot of moving parts in Denver. And I really think he is probably going to be a starter next year if he stays on that team. And if he figures out a good little niche, he could put up a ton of points on a really good team and is going to get a ton of run in the next year's playoffs, assuming they make it. That's really spinning it forward. But regardless, I could see him getting buzzy. And you can actually see the last couple days, his PSA 10 prices are actually already starting to uptick a little bit. I'll be curious to keep an eye on that because they just got eliminated from the playoffs and his prices are creeping up. He spiked early in the bubble. He had like 3 straight games of 40 points. Then he slowly downticked and had little spikes where he would kind of show flashes. But he's basically leveled off at around 200 to 250. It looks like it's still jumping around a little bit there. But prior to that, he was like 130, 135. This was way back in the summer before the bubble games even started. So you could get his base raw is going for about $30. And I can tell you back here, these were going for almost 75 to 80. I had 3 base raws. I did not think they would 10. I thought they were probably PSA 9s. And I sold them raw during the peak. Now, part of that was because I got a really good deal on a red, white, and blue PSA 10. I got it for $200 before everything spiked. And that was out the door, shipping, tax, everything included. So I decided to sell my raws at the basically the peak um to kind of essentially pay for the PSA 10 red, white, and blue. Actually, I came out ahead. And considering I paid next to nothing for the porters, I bought them back in January or February for like 8 or 10 bucks a piece, actually less than that, I think. So I would be perfectly fine buying raws and holding them as well because I could easily see those going back up again. I mean, just a month ago they were 75 bucks, 85 bucks a piece, and obviously that's when the market was insane. But I could easily see Porter getting back to that place, and I really like him as a buy now and hold. Once again, I would have no problem, and I would probably encourage holding Porter into next season. And even if he would get traded, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that would be really good for his value. So if we come down here, we can see his chart. $32 is the end average for the raw, 260 for the PSA 10. Um, that's a nice spread on that. You're $50 into it. You're basically adding $200 in value if you could pull a raw with and get back that PSA 10. So Porter Jr. is number 3. Number 4, Phoenix Suns, and that is Mr. DeAndre Ayton. Once again, his graph pretty steady. He got the spike with the run up with the Suns in the playoffs, and then kind of leveled back out again. But if we come down here, his base prism is only $14 right now. PSA 10's only 120. That seems really cheap for. And I know, was he deserving of the number 1 overall pick? Yada yada with Luca and Trey there, and a few other guys. He probably shouldn't have gone number 1 overall, but he's put up some really nice numbers for them, especially in the bubble games. He kind of gets forgotten about because Booker gets all the hype. Uh, and I think the Suns are going to be extremely trendy. And even though big guys aren't necessarily the best buy in the world, I think his prices are really good right now. $13 a piece for a raw prism of him. That just seems like nothing. That is super, super cheap. I'd be loading up on those, even if you don't grade them, just to hold in the next season. So Ayton is number 4. And like I said, they're going to be a very trendy team based off the way that they played. Now, whether or not they can back that up, who knows? But I can easily see Ayton getting pumped to high hell come Christmas time on YouTube and in the social media spheres of the sports card investor / collector universe. He's a prime candidate to get pumped. And you're better off to buy those guys now. Yeah, you got to sit on the money for a few months, but it's usually well worth it typically, especially when the entry point's so low, even if you don't grade them. People always say, how do I get into this hobby? Everything's so expensive. Well, you got these Aytons here for 10 to 15 bucks a piece. You can get 10 of them for $15 on the high side, including shipping and taxes. And then, just sit on them and see what happens. But that's a fairly low entry point in the grand scheme of things compared to some of this stuff. Even if you don't grade them at all, just hold them raw. That's not the worst thing in the world. It's perfectly fine to buy and sell raw cards. It gets a little trickier, but, it's perfectly fine. And then the last one is, and full disclosure, I own this card. I bought it at its near peak. I think I bought it right here-ish. Right in here-ish, the 230 to 250 mark. And then he got hurt. And then the Sixers look like trash. This is Ben Simmons 2016 Optic. PSA 10 or raw. If we come down here to the charts, Raw for $20 on this seems like a steal. PSA 10s for under 150 also seem like a really good deal. Simmons is one of the best young players in the league. They are most likely getting a new, or they are getting a new coach. It's probably going to be Ty Lue or Mike D'Antoni, one of the two. I don't think they're going to get, some young kid that no one's ever heard of before. I think they're going to go with a big name. As of the recording of this video, Doc Rivers just let go, so there's a good chance Ty Lue maybe just goes back or goes to the Clippers. We'll see. But I think a new coach can give him a breath of fresh air. And these optics at $18 a piece for Raw, when at one point they were going for almost 50 to $60 a piece, is a nice pickup. And then if you can grade them and flip them in, I think he has tremendous ability for his cards to go way up when next season gets rolling, especially depending on what they do with the coach. But regardless, 150 is too cheap for this PSA 10, and I think 18 is way too cheap for this optic Raw card. Um, the starting average of this chart way back in, and I'm going back 90 days on these, of basically July 1st, this was a $40 card. I could easily see it getting back to $40 around the start of the season, because once again, he's going to be a prime candidate. Someone's going to look at this and go, he's too cheap. Now, I didn't do Prism here. This was the one exception that I did not do Prism, because his Prism stuff is a lot pricier. His optic stuff is very undervalued, I think, specifically on him. So that's the reason why I went optic with this. Part of the point of this series is to give low dollar entry points for people to get into the NBA market, because I know that it can be super expensive. So, but Simmons is the last one we got today. If you have any questions or comments down below, or there's anyone that I egregiously missed, and this was not meant to be all encompassing, there's plenty of players I could have talked about. I tried to go with guys that were a little less spec, not your like KZ Okpalas and your Terrence Davises and stuff like that, and guys that I felt a little bit more sure about. Um, because the goal of this series is for entry points for people, or even people that are already in it, just to make what should be easy money in theory, assuming that the market stays semi-normal, but who the hell knows. So that's all I have for you guys today. Like I said, I think the next video that I'm going to do, the next little video series, is going to be looking at individual star players. So we'll probably hit all the big names once again: Luka, Ja, Zion, Trey, etc., and kind of work through the key cards of them and see if anything is lagging, or any areas of missed opportunity. Like is the BGS 9.5 on a specific Luka a really good deal relative to the PSA 9 and 10, or vice versa, whatever. But I kind of want to do a deep dive on some individual players now that prices have seemed to flatten out and the market seems to be stabilizing for these guys that are well out of the playoffs now, and look to buy, graded versions of those cards, etc. That would be more higher end entry points. Talking about buying Luka Optic PSA 9s or something for around $200 a pop, or 250, whatever they are. Um, but that's what I'm looking to do next in terms of NBA stuff, as we continue to roll through the NBA finals and into the off season. And then if you guys have anything that you want to see videos on NBA wise, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, and we will see what we could get crack-a-lacking. So that's all I got for you guys tonight. We will catch you on the next one, and peace.